If you've been woodworking for any length of time, you know it's not all about smooth cuts and perfect glue ups. Today I want to talk about some of the challenges that I faced in woodworking. You know, the really hard stuff. The stuff that almost made me quit. And I want to talk about how I eventually pushed through those challenges. Whether you're brand new or you've been doing this for years, I want you to know that you are not alone. And maybe I can give you a few shortcuts or two that I wish I had when I started out. So when I first got started, I didn't actually realize I was getting started. I just had desires to make stuff, but I didn't think that would turn into any sort of hobby of any kind, just sort of a one-off situation. No tools, no space, and no money. Except, I guess I did have a tool. I had a circular saw that my dad gave me, and the blade was like super wobbly, and the cord had multiple repair spots in it, which I think were fixed with duct tape. I don't know. I also had a tape measure, but I think that's literally it. But I was sick of crappy IKEA furniture made of MDF with a thin veneer of wood or painted, and I just wanted something better. I wanted something that would be a thing that we keep in our house for a long time and maybe even pass on to my kids. I just wanted something made of real wood, something solid. So we'd recently moved into a different house, and I had an idea for a coffee table. And I actually downloaded plans to make the coffee table, and I made some adjustments to make it the exact size. Essentially, we tried to find a table like this, and we looked around everywhere and couldn't find something that was quite the right size. So I told my wife maybe I could make one. And she thought I was crazy, of course. But I always kind of had the ability to just do things. If I set my mind to it, I could do it. I think that just comes with trying things and failing a lot and then eventually succeeding. So I started thinking about what I needed to make this table. And I bought a few tools just to get me through. One of the tools was a pocket hole jig, but I used that crappy circular saw that I had. And that's pretty much all I bought, I think, was a pocket hole jig. And I pretty much made that whole table with a circular saw, pocket hole jig, and a tape measure. So I bought my first tool. It was cheap, but that got me going. And that was all I really needed for that project. And I think that's a good growth strategy when you're getting into a hobby, is have the project that you're working on define what you need right now. Then you can add things later if you need something for another project. And before you know it, you'll have all the tools you need to build just about anything. While I was getting into this and starting to build this table, just like all of you, hopefully, you've watched YouTube videos and you try to get inspiration and learn. But I find some of the bigger channels are a little bit intimidating when they have a climate controlled workshop and $100,000 worth of tools. And it can just be scary to think that you have to have all of that to start woodworking, and you don't. It's nice, but you don't need all that stuff. I think you just have to be very careful about what channels you watch, because it can actually make you not want to start woodworking or whatever your hobby might be. There's a right way to do everything and 15 wrong ones, right? No. There's many ways to do things. I think that it's more important to figure out the right way to do things for you with the tools that you have, but I think that you always have to keep safety in mind. I think when you start to do things that are unsafe, that's when they're wrong. But as long as you're doing it safely, there's no wrong way. So as far as joinery goes, that's something I'm still figuring out every project I do. I still am not like a joinery master. I still use pocket holes sometimes. Dowels are usually about as complex as I get. Sometimes I use box joints, but it's with a jig. I still can't really make joinery with a chisel yet. It's something I still want to learn. I'm always going to be learning. And as far as squareness, I think that squareness is all about setting your tools up properly and having the proper tools to measure for squareness. Tool setup. Don't trust the setup that's on your tools when you buy them, because they probably aren't right. So you should always readjust your tools when you buy them to make sure you're cutting square. Wood movement is huge. I think my biggest failure ever was when I made my farmhouse table, and the tabletop was made out of really nice white oak, and I didn't know that wood moved differently in different directions, and it had breadboard ends. I think anybody that knows anything about wood movement knows what probably happened. The tabletop cracked, and I ended up rebuilding it, and if you want to watch that video, you can watch that up here. And the second time I rebuilt it, I did it with dowels, and I've never had another issue ever since. Everything in woodworking is a little bit imperfect, but functional beats perfection any day of the week. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm an engineer. My normal job requires extreme precision, but we're working with metal, not wood, and it doesn't move quite as much. Just remember as you're doing things that it's never going to be perfect, but most people won't even see the things that aren't perfect to you. I guess that's the only issue with making something yourself, is you'll always see the imperfections. Just like I always think a peanut butter jelly sandwich is always better when somebody else makes it. I don't know why. When I first got my table saw, it scared the crap out of me. But I think that the fear of my table saw was good because it made me respect it. While other tools like my router are not very intimidating and I don't respect them as much generally, and those are usually the tools I hurt myself with. Even though I respected my table saw, I still made a lot of mistakes while I was learning how to use it. And you guys were actually really good at pointing that out for me in some of my early videos where I wore some long baggy sleeves. Wasn't a good choice. I got lucky. I learned. I moved on. I also had a couple of kickbacks on video early on, and I'm glad I was able to capture them because I try to share those whenever I can. Not to scare you, but to remind you how dangerous these tools actually can be. As I started using the tools more, and I started to become more safe and learned what was safe and what wasn't safe, I started to gain confidence. And I still try to do things on a regular basis to be safe. No long sleeves if possible. If I do wear long sleeves because it's cold, I keep them nice and tight. I always use a push stick or push blocks. I try not to get close to the blade or reach over it. I also tend to stand off to one side, so if I do have a kickback, it'll kick past me instead of at me because it hurts. Ask me how I know. It's important to learn what's safe and what's not, but it's also important to learn why. Like, what's the purpose of a riving knife, for example? I like to understand safety features and why they help with safety. The tools I'm still cautious with today are the table saw for obvious reasons, because I don't want to be one of those people that posts on Instagram that I cut my fingers off and had them sewed back on in ER. And also the tools that have actually hurt me. Those are the other ones I'm cautious with. So I have learned to become more cautious around my router because I've nipped the tip of my finger off a couple of times, and I don't want to do that anymore because it hurts. And the most recent time I hurt myself was while caulking my shower with my caulk gun. It can happen with any tool, but unfortunately, pain is the best teacher. There's a lot to learn when it comes to wood finishes, and in the beginning, just like everybody else, I went to Home Depot and I bought whatever they had that was in the right color I wanted, and I used it. And it worked fine, but when I look back at some of those projects, they just look so terrible to me compared to some of the stuff I use now. And I think that as you get better at woodworking, you start to realize that the whole point of woodworking and using nice wood is to accent that wood and not try to cover it up. So whenever I see a project that I did where I've used a heavy stain or something that covered the grain, I cringe a little bit. I just want to sand it off and put something else on. And I've done that many times. So at some point I started using less of the stuff from the big box stores and more higher end stuff. At first the cost kind of hurts, but it's worth it. Right now my favorite finish is probably Rubio Monocoat. You may have seen that on my last project, which you can watch right here. It does a very good job at accenting the grain of the wood and adding a small amount of color without completely changing it, which I think is perfect. It's also very hard, very durable. It's a good finish. And more I've been learning that prep is a huge part of finish. So you don't really want to take shortcuts with prep. I've also had to redo projects because I could see swirl marks in the finish from my sander. I've recently upgraded my sander. Again, very expensive, but it's fast and it does a really good job. I've had amazing results with it and I don't regret it a bit. But that might be something you need to work up to. Not everybody can afford a sander that expensive. Also, sandpaper matters. I didn't think that before. I used to just buy cheap stuff, but better sandpaper will leave a better finish. Also, it's a good idea to replace your sandpaper when it starts to get too worn or gunked up, or it can leave swirl marks or other undesirable things in your finish. Sometimes when you have bigger projects, they feel like they're never gonna end. Or sometimes you finish a project and it didn't turn out at all how you expected. And then you'll just wonder if you're ever going to get better and you feel like you're not improving. But then when I have feelings like that, I like to look back at some of my older projects and see how I improved along the way. It's fun to compare your newest project to one of your earlier projects, if you still have them around. I always enjoyed woodworking, but at some point right around the time I started my YouTube channel, I realized that music and woodworking go hand in hand for me. Sometimes I listen to country, sometimes I listen to oldies. It kind of depends on my mood. But you'll find me many times sanding or doing something that doesn't require hearing protection with my earmuffs on because I have music in them. And there's something about the Zen moment where I'm doing something with woodworking and listening to music that just puts me in this zone that just allows me to escape reality for just a little while. But YouTube also created a situation for me where I felt more pressure to make more and more things, but it also motivated me to continue to learn. And your comments also help me learn. And I like to learn with you guys, sort of like a community. So doing my woodworking on YouTube is great, but it also does create a lot more pressure as well. Frankly, sometimes it can suck the fun out of projects a little bit. So every now and then I like to do a project that is not filmed, just for me. Would a hobby even be fun if you were immediately good at it? Well, the good news is the challenges never go away. They just change, but so do you. If you're struggling with anything in your woodworking journey, please put it in the comments. I'd love to help because the chances are I've been there too.